Very good morning to everyone. And we have a fantastic audience today. And I'm very excited to moderate the panel on fintech and payments. I think a very important one, because fintech and payments still attracts the most investment when we look at all the sectors in which VCs are investing in Southeast Asia. And we have some fantastic companies in Vietnam and representatives of those companies today on stage. So we hope for a very good discussion. And maybe without further ado, I will jump into some questions that we prepared for today. And I hope we can exchange our experiences. Maybe let me start with the Vice Chairman of Momo, Mr. Diep. The first question would go to you. And I want to ask you about your view on the development of e-wallets in Vietnam. You're definitely one of the market leaders, and you've been in this space for quite some time, very successful. Right now, we see a lot of e-wallets in Vietnam, I think more than 30. So it seems when you look at the country from outside, it seems very fragmented. How do you think this landscape will look like in the next couple of years? Will there be consolidation? How is Momo thinking about that, and whether you will participate in this consolidation process, if there is any, to happen in the next years?
Thank you for your question. Can I answer in Vietnamese so the audience can see that?
Of course.
Kính thưa quý vị và các bạn, thế thì trong thời gian qua, thì nhất là dịp Covid, tôi nhận thấy rằng là cái thị trường thanh toán điện tử, đặc biệt là ví điện tử, có cái sự phát triển rất là mạnh và đột biến, từ ngay cả phía khách hàng và ngay cả các phía đơn vị tham gia dịch vụ. Ví dụ như trước đây thì Momo trước dịch thì có 10 triệu khách hàng, sau dịch trong vòng 1 năm chúng tôi có thêm 10 triệu khách hàng nữa. Thế thì hiện nay theo cái thống kê của ngân hàng nhà nước trên thị trường có 38 ví điện tử tất cả, và cũng theo những cái thống kê chính thức thì 5 ví lớn nhất là chiếm 95% toàn bộ giao dịch của toàn bộ cái thị trường ví điện tử. Thế thì theo quan điểm của tôi với một cái thị trường như Việt Nam với một dân số khoảng 100 triệu thì trong vòng từ 3 đến 5 tới sẽ chỉ còn khoảng từ 2 đến 3 ví có thể tồn tại được. Và những cái ví nhỏ thì sẽ phải tìm những cái thị trường rất là riêng biệt, những cái nhỏ hơn để tồn tại. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you very much. Maybe following on this, second question would be to Mr. Bing from VN Life. And first of all, congratulations. I think recently you've been recognized as the second Vietnamese unicorn, which is a fantastic achievement. How do you succeed in this space? Like, what is the secret sauce? What's the recipe to really succeed? Looking at, from a perspective of a relatively large organization that you already have, but also if you can share some of your advice to entrepreneurs that are here today, how do you build such a successful organization over years?
Sorry, so I speak in Vietnamese.
That's okay. Yes, of course.
Rất là cảm ơn ban tổ chức. Ngày hôm nay thì tôi cảm thấy rất là tự hào được đại diện cho VNPay ngồi đây để chia sẻ với lại tất cả các bạn về những cái thành quả mà phía VNLife là công ty mẹ của VNPay đã đạt được trong thời gian vừa qua. Thì để nói về công thức thì rất là khó, nhưng mà chúng tôi nhận thấy là đối ngày hôm nay VNPay cũng như VNLife chúng tôi có được những cái thành quả được nhìn nhận là một trong những công ty hàng đầu Việt Nam về lĩnh vực thanh toán và lĩnh vực fintech. Thì có may mắn của chúng tôi đó chính là chúng tôi có những cái đội ngũ nhân sự rất là tốt và chất lượng, đồng hành với nhau hơn 13 năm. Và chúng tôi biết được là thế mạnh của chúng tôi là công nghệ, và chúng tôi tập trung rất nhiều vào cái việc là đầu tư về con người, đầu tư vào công nghệ. Có những cái giải pháp công nghệ ở Việt Nam chúng ta, tức là trên thế giới thì đã được triển khai rất là lâu rồi, nhưng tuy nhiên khi vào Việt Nam thì chúng ta còn phải tuân thủ theo những quy định của ngân hàng nhà nước, tuân thủ theo những quy định của các bộ ban ngành, thì để mà triển khai được nó đúng quy định, đúng quy chuẩn thì và nó lại đáp ứng được những cái yêu cầu công nghệ mới ấy, thì nó cần một quãng thời gian nghiên cứu khá là dài và tốn nhiều nguồn lực. Tôi ví dụ như là để triển khai được một cái thiết bị là Smart POS, tức là thiết bị thanh toán thông minh tại Việt Nam ấy, thì chúng tôi phải mất hơn 2 năm. Trong khi những cái thiết bị đấy thì ở trên thế giới đã có từ trước đấy khoảng 5 năm rồi. Thì nhưng nếu mà không có đầu tư về mặt công nghệ cũng như là con người ấy, thì chúng ta sẽ không bao giờ có được những cái sự thay đổi và những cái sự phát triển vượt bậc cả. Và cái thành công của chúng tôi ngày hôm nay thì nó cũng đến từ những cái giá trị cốt lõi của chúng tôi là chúng tôi sẵn sàng đầu tư. Ngoài ra thì chúng tôi có những cái chiến lược dài hạn rất là rõ ràng, và có những cái chiến lược về kinh doanh cũng như là thực thi ngắn hạn thì cũng rất là uyển chuyển. Tôi ví dụ như là chúng tôi luôn coi chúng tôi là những thành viên trong gia đình của đối tác, của khách hàng chúng tôi. Cái mô hình của chúng tôi thì nó cũng hơi đặc biệt là chúng tôi cung cấp các giải pháp và hạ tầng công nghệ, đầu tư xây dựng nó, còn sau đấy thì các công ty khác ở Việt Nam, kể cả startup hoặc là kể cả các cái doanh nghiệp khác hoàn toàn có thể là tạo ra những cái dịch vụ mới hoặc là tạo ra những sản phẩm mới dựa trên cái nền tảng công nghệ chúng tôi đã xây dựng. Thì đấy là thứ mà chúng tôi luôn tập trung để làm, và chúng tôi luôn muốn là xác định hiểu được là các cái ngân hàng, các doanh nghiệp lớn ở Việt Nam ấy, thì cần có những cái đối tác đồng hành như VNPay. Vì chúng tôi khi triển khai theo mô hình ấy, thì chúng tôi không làm theo hướng outsourcing mà chúng tôi làm theo hướng là chia sẻ lợi nhuận, chia sẻ doanh thu. Vì vậy nếu như mà VNPay làm không tốt sản phẩm, không cung cấp được những sản phẩm tốt ấy, thì chúng tôi sẽ không có lợi nhuận và toàn bộ những cái gì chúng tôi đầu tư nó là lãng phí. Thì đấy là tôi nghĩ đấy là cái hướng đi của chúng tôi đã mang lại đến thành công. Ngoài ra thì để khuyên những cái nhà đầu tư, doanh nhân hay là các doanh nghiệp khác ấy, thì thực ra rất là khó, bởi vì là mỗi doanh nghiệp hay mỗi cá nhân thì đều có những cái điểm mạnh khác nhau. Nhưng về phía quan điểm của tôi ấy, thì tôi có một số những quan điểm như sau. Thứ nhất, công nghệ luôn là điều quan trọng trong cái giai đoạn mà tất cả nhà đều hướng đến chuyển đổi số. Thứ hai đó chính là con người. Cái năng lực xã hội của Việt Nam, năng lực con người của chúng ta cần phải được nâng lên rất là nhiều, và các công ty phải luôn là tạo ra những môi trường làm việc tốt, sẵn sàng đầu tư. Nó không phải chỉ là 1 năm, 2 năm mà mang lại thành quả, mà đôi khi phải đến 5 đến 6 năm. Thì tôi ví dụ như rất nhiều công ty bây giờ đang đầu tư vào AI, Machine Learning hay Big Data, nhưng tại thời điểm hiện tại để mà ra được những công ty mà có thành quả về những cái lĩnh vực này thì thực ra ở Việt Nam lại chưa nhìn nhận được nhiều. Nhưng 3 năm nữa thì tôi nghĩ là khi mà những dữ liệu ở Việt Nam nó được số hóa tốt hơn, được dán nhãn tốt hơn, được đánh giá tốt hơn ấy, thì thời điểm đó sẽ có rất nhiều những cái dịch vụ và mô hình kinh doanh mới được sinh ra từ đây. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mr. Nam will have a question to you. I think we discussed a bit so far on what it takes, the determination, the technology to win. But still coming back a bit to the current fragmentation that we are seeing in the e-payments market, what do you think? Do you think there's enough space for all those players to be successful? And you know, we had quite a lot of discussions over the last 5-6 years, especially maybe 5-6 years ago, which kind of model will Vietnam follow? Whether we will follow the model of some of our bigger neighbors or some of more developed countries in terms of development of e-payments. I think we are going our own way, but then it poses certain challenges to all the players in the fintech, especially payments industry. How do you think this end state could look like, and what do those companies actually need to win, somehow survive?
First of all, I think the market is huge, right? The market is very fragmented, but it's big. Vietnam has nearly 100 million people, and the economy is growing among the fastest in the world. So, and today, the level of development for fintech overall and e-payment is still relatively low. So I think there's a lot of room. So I don't worry about having too many players in the market. Everyone has their own strength, and I think everyone has a chance because the market is so big. The main competitor for e-payment or for fintech overall actually is cash. Right? It's not among us. Among us, I think it's easy because everyone has, like I said, has their own strength. The biggest challenge and the biggest competitor is cash. Consumers' habit of using cash every day, as you saw before, the ratio of cashless payment in Vietnam is so low compared to the other markets today. So that's the biggest challenge, apart from technology, human resource, and so on. In order to overcome that huge challenge and to some extent overcome the fragmentation and succeed in delivering your value to the customers, is actually focusing on the customers. And today we see, not only in Vietnam, but especially in Vietnam, with the young population, every consumer is becoming more and more digital in their life. They spend more and more time on their phone. They do more and more things on their smartphone today. Well, they touch their phone maybe 100 times a day. So focusing on the daily usage of their smartphone is what we do in order to overcome the challenge of switching consumer from the habit of using cash over to using e-payment and fintech. So that's why we were from very early on focusing on the daily usage. For example, even before we had the fortune of partnering with Grab, we focused on taxi, for example, even before Grab entering the Vietnam market, because that's the daily use case, and we focus on F&B, food and beverage. So you travel every day and you eat and drink. So that's, I think, how every player can, you can generalize that, focusing on the users and their daily life. And recently you hear more about embedded finance, or you embed payment, you embed your fintech services into the digital life of the consumers. That's how I think we can overcome the cash challenge, and that's the biggest challenge in this market today.
So maybe a quick follow-up on this. So how long do you think this change will take to basically accelerate this daily number of touch points, digital touch points that you're building? Like, how fast is this change progressing based on your experience?
I think it could be very fast, especially with COVID. And let me give you some example. Two huge changes to the Vietnam consumer behavior in the last 5 years. One is wearing a helmet when you go out on the street on a motorbike. That's changed like everyone on the street, everyone in Vietnam, tens of millions. And that's from the government's effort. The second biggest change is actually using mobile phone for ride hailing and for food ordering. That's what you see in the past 5 years. That's the biggest change. And that's come from the effort of various startups, right? Uber coming in and Grab today, and so on, and other players. So it can be fairly fast, especially with COVID happening in the last year. You heard before, the digitalization happened so quickly. And from our view, where we do what we do, where we stay, we can share with you, over the last year, we already have 2.5 million consumers using our e-payment. And that's like more than the last 5 years, the previous 5 years combined. The cashless payment overall in the market, you heard before, some figure, roughly 5%. On the Grab ecosystem, Moca being the sole payment service provider, we have 43% of all spending on Grab going through Moca in cashless. And Grab Mart, for example, is a new service on the Grab ecosystem largely because of COVID. 70% of transaction on Grab Mart happening through Moca with e-payment. So those are numbers I think that can give us encouragement that things can move very, very fast. And e-commerce, not to mention, I think that's already very speeding up.
Very, very exciting times ahead of us. I think we're going to move to Indonesia right now. And we have Aldi and we have Nguyen online. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we had a short delay, so apologies for that, but happy to see you on the screen in front of us. Maybe let me start with Aldi. You're the CEO of GoPay, one of the largest and most successful payment companies in Southeast Asia. I would like to go a bit further, talk a bit beyond e-payments. I would like to talk about, ask you about the new products that you're testing. because I think you're experimenting quite a lot with different business models and introducing peer-to-peer lending and doing SME financing, pay later model. Which of these areas do you find most exciting? Where do you want to put your bets going forward? That's something that we can also learn from you in Vietnam.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah, we do experiment a lot actually, and we have a lot of things being cooked right now in the oven. I would say that there's two main areas where I believe there's a lot of potential. Let me explain. The first one is related to how can you create financial products around transactions that were previously too difficult for banks to, or any financial institution to credit score or to deliver a product. So Pay Later is a great example where we're basically giving credit for a single go ride or go food delivery, right? And so the reason why banks are not able to do this is traditionally they had to have an application, someone had to review it, they had to do credit checks and so forth. But because we also happen to be delivering the product in real time, and we have already data on the consumer, a lot of the things that we do for whether it's an insurance for the food delivery, it's a credit for that meal, or anything that has to do with that particular micro transaction can now be made into a financial product, right? So there are going to be trends in this direction that is enabled because of the transaction platform that companies like us are developing. So I feel like that's one area. The second area is with regards to the unbanked or underbanked population. So regulations in most countries are quite strict when it comes to KYC users or opening a bank branch. And so a big percentage of the population in Indonesia, majority actually, is still don't have a bank account. So what we're seeing is that with GoPay, for example, we're starting to use our ability for our drivers who earn income from us to do an auto deduction every day so that they can get them qualified for a mortgage and deduct their daily income so that they can make sure that they meet their mortgage payments every day. So, and I met one of them, and for her, it was a game changer because she would go to all these banks and they would never approve her because there's no fixed income that she qualifies for, and there's no convenient way for her to pay. So I feel like these two areas are going to be the next frontier for fintech, whether it be these micro transactions or these actually traditional products that were previously unable to be reached by these people who are unbanked.
Thank you. So I think you maybe one quick follow-up on the points that you made. You mentioned credit scoring system. Is this something that you develop in-house, and how important it is for you?
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's really important. Ultimately, like every lending institution needs to have the ability to credit score as one of their core competencies, right? And so because we have the data on our users that is not available outside, you know, we're able to score them, we believe, more effectively than anybody else. And I feel like what's going to be interesting is actually when you start having these people who are unbanked enter into these payment systems that are e-wallets, like the way you already have in Vietnam as well, then you can start creating credit scores for them as well. And so then a bigger portion of the population will start having access to services that you and I and everybody here generally takes for granted.
Thank you. Iwan, maybe a question for you right now. You are actually in a segment that is very attractive right now, also in Vietnam. Everyone is talking about SMEs and how to do SME lending, how to do peer-to-peer lending for SMEs. And I think many companies, not only in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, are trying to replicate or maybe not replicate your model, but get some inspiration from what you're doing. I think from McKinsey's perspective, for example, it's quite challenging because a lot of people are talking about that, but it's actually not so easy to build, not so easy to scale up. So we wanted to ask you, how did you manage to build that traction, and how different it is to think about serving SME segment versus serving like individuals?
Thanks for your question, and first of all, thank you to the Vietnamese government, the Vietnam NIC, the Golden Gate Ventures, and as well as other organizers for inviting me into this session. A quick introduction before I answer your question. So I'm the co-founder CEO of Modalku. We're known as Modalku in Indonesia, as well as funding societies in Singapore and Malaysia. So we're licensed by the MAS in Singapore, the OJK in Indonesia, as well as the Securities Commission in Malaysia. Since 2015, we have given out $1.3 billion US of financing to SMEs in Southeast Asia. So why SMEs? SMEs are very important for the economy. At the same time, it's actually very challenging, as you mentioned earlier in your question, to serve them. What we have proven in the last few years is that we're able to operate and scale in very different markets. Singapore and Indonesia are very different. Likewise, in Malaysia as well. Very different data infrastructure, very different market needs and demands and so forth. Also very different regulations. And the first couple of years was actually really working closely with the regulators, convincing them how fintech lending can help SMEs in ways that banks are not able to today. Aldi mentioned some use cases earlier, right? In where fintechs can help SMEs differently than banks can. And how can we also manage the risk? And then investing in market education as well, in that SMEs perhaps traditionally are still very used to working with banks. So why fintech? How different are fintechs from banks? And how do they apply online as opposed to going to a bank branch to apply for a loan as they used to before? And then finally, that tipping point of scale is really getting the operations and credit risk right. As you mentioned correctly just now, SMEs are very difficult to serve. And that's because the SMEs are not really much a homogeneous segment. They're very different. You have companies, you have sole proprietors who are individuals. These companies may have 3 directors, they may have 2 owners, and they may have 4 or 5 shops and different businesses. So it's actually very difficult to serve them. And how we have been able to overcome that is by working with different ecosystem partners, may that be supply chain partners to work with supply chains across Southeast Asia, working with technology partners who need a partner to help them to serve the clients that they currently work with, the SMEs that they currently serve, as well as trying and testing different sources of financials that we can use to analyze, may that be bank statements or digital invoicing data, or there could be e-commerce transaction data, and finding creative ways to secure repayments in a way that banks are not that used to. So hopefully we can take this experience in other markets in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, and hope to share more as well.
Thank you very much. I think we are all, as we sit here and based on everything that you said, we are very excited about the fintech and payments market, whether it's in Vietnam, whether it's in Indonesia, whether it's in Singapore. We all see that there's a lot of growth still for everyone. So all of you guys who are entrepreneurs and investors, it's still a very good sector to be in. So don't be afraid to come in. As Mr. Nam said, the market is still very big and there's an opportunity for a lot of people to play. I think we can learn from each other and we can also learn from the experiences in Indonesia. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we would need to wrap up the session. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you, Aldi and Nguyen, again for joining us online. And I hope we can continue this discussion after the panel and maybe after the conference is over. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, panelists.